Hi, welcome back to the Actors Waiting Room podcast. It is another solo episode this week, and we're going to be talking about surviving rejection. So I was a little bit apprehensive about talking about rejection within the entertainment industry. Obviously, because I'm an actor, so I experience a lot of rejection. That's just kind of the deal that happens when you're an actor, and that happens when, you're a musical theatre performer, you're a dancer. And I can imagine it's probably the same if you're a writer, you're a voiceover artist, or whatever creative you are. There's a lot of rejection that comes with it. And I was a little apprehensive of talking about it because I didn't know if this was something that was going to end up being a little bit miserable to talk about. But then I thought, no, because it is important, and it's a big part of what we do. And this is the main reason why people possibly don't want to enter into this industry, or don't want to just don't want to go further, or it might hinder people in some ways. And so, I was a little bit worried about talking about it because I just didn't want to listen back to my audio and just be like, Jesus Christ, Grace, that's really fucking depressing. Do you know what I mean? Nobody wants to hear that right now. So we're going to try and motivate at the same time. But and I also don't have all the answers, and I want to make that clear as well, is that I'm still navigating this industry. I mean, it's the whole reason why the podcast began in the first place, to try and navigate and humanize the acting industry from the actor's perspective, or the creative's perspective, if you like. So we're going to give it a go. And now, you know what, if it's that depressing, then it won't air, and it won't see the light of day. So we'll just put it that way. I actually am drinking my cup of tea as well today, because last time I think I did a solo episode, I made the cup of tea and then just didn't touch it for the whole episode. And then I was like, well, I've just now got a cold cup of tea, and what was the point of making it in the first place? So I'm sorry for the audio if you don't like a bit of, is it ASMR? Is that what it is? Yeah, sorry about that, but I will be drinking tea throughout this because I'm a tea drinker. That's that. Okay, so let's start with the challenges that come with surviving rejection. So here we go. Right, big breath, everybody. Surviving rejection obviously is the worst thing. It's also the worst part for me because the rejection part isn't like a physical, verbal no. A lot of the time when you get rejected from a role, it's like ghost town. You don't actually hear the no. So you go in for auditions, and at whatever stage, I mean, if you're down to the last two people for some quite big project, your agent usually tells you if it's a no. But on the day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year, there are a lot of auditions that we do where you actually don't receive a no. And so you don't really get closure. And I think that is probably I think that's the hardest thing. It's that, it is a no, but I'm now at the stage where I would rather someone just tell me the no. And I get it. We can't all have that, because think about how many of us are in the industry. But it is something to think about, the fact that we don't actually get proper closure from each audition, which I think is one of the biggest challenges with surviving that rejection. And then sometimes, I mean, this has happened to me before, where you've auditioned for something you haven't heard for a month or so, and you're like, okay, we assume that's the no. I mean, I assume it's a no after 2 weeks, to be honest, or I just try and put it out of my head. But sometimes they come back to you and you're like, oh, I thought this was already gone. I thought this was done and dusted. We weren't dealing with this anymore. And then they ask for a recall or another self-tape or another in-person audition. And then you're like, oh, and so the want for that begins again because you're like, oh, maybe they didn't say no. And because of this one time that you heard back, maybe, a month or 2 months later, it then puts that idea in your head that whenever you do an audition, that, you know, well, I haven't heard back in a week or 2 weeks, but, you know, since the last job that I did or the last audition that I had, they didn't get back to me for like 2 months or a month. You know, like I've had things that have been a really long time and they've come back to you, and for whatever reason, they've come back to you and asked you to do another take or to do another audition, basically. And so this is the hard patch that you get with it. And especially if you're new starting out, because you kind of want, if you're like me, I wanted some sort of like rule. I wanted some sort of set rule book to be like, okay, this is the cutoff when I can kind of mourn, or whatever you want to say, for the loss of the fact that you didn't get that job. You kind of have to let that go, and like letting go of that that control, if you like, of that part of the industry is, you know, that's really hard. That's having a lot of faith. And I think that is kind of like one of the really tough things that we deal with surviving rejection. Obviously, the main point is you don't get to do the job, you know, and if it's particularly a job that you really, really want as well, like you really love the script, you really love the part, it's kind of maybe a good step in the right direction for your career, they really hurt and they're a bitch. And like, those are the ones that are the soul crushing ones in a way. I think as I've got older in the industry, it's been a bit more, first round auditions to me are like first dates. I like, well, speed dating. Let's call it like speed dating. Not that I've ever actually been on a speed date, but I can imagine that that's what it's like. So you come in, I don't really hold much hopes for it. I'd give it my best shot, obviously. But as soon as the first round audition is done, I forget about it. I probably go and do something nice afterwards, probably see a friend. But nowadays I actually just, if it's self-tape, I just film it, shut it off and carry on with my day. Like, and I really try and forget about it. It's when the recalls come in, third, fourth round, however many rounds that come in, and you're like, oh, I could get it now. And those thoughts start to get a little bit spirally. They start to get a little bit like, okay, so I'm at a day job right now. So when would I have to leave? What's the notice period? Okay, let's sort that out. Let's have a look at the money wise. Let's see if we can plan this. Because, you know, and I don't think that's not abnormal. Like, that's a genuine thing that people plan for. People plan for their futures, and that's a very realistic thing to do, to be like, okay, this might be happening, so I actually need to start putting my affairs in orders, especially if the shoot or the show is, or the rehearsals or whatever is going to start very, very quickly, which they usually do. But obviously they don't help, do they? They don't help with the whole, like, we're not going to get our hopes up, we're just not going to think about it. It's like, yeah, it's just not going to happen, is it? You're just obviously going to think about it. And so, yeah, the further down you get, or the closer you get to this role, I find it really hard. And so when you do get that no, you're like, okay, how do we forget about it and move on? And this is kind of what we wanted to talk about in this episode today. And I also wanted to push out as well that if you have any other tips as well for like surviving rejection when these clips go out on social media, or like, you know, the episode's going to go out on YouTube, please put them in there, put them in the comments, because I'm always really interested to see how other people get by. The majority of us kind of do the same thing where we're like, oh, okay, you know, it didn't happen, I'm just going to try and forget about it and go about your day. But it still kind of festers there for a little while before you get the chance to move on. And it might just be a time thing. It might just be an experience thing of being like, oh, I've had loads of no's, it's no different to the other no. Or, you know, it might be your first very big no, and that's really hard as well. So if anybody has any of those little pearls of wisdoms, or just little, I don't know, things that they do to make them feel better, please put them in the comments, because I'm all ears. I definitely don't have all the answers. I just wanted to talk about it in the hope that my dream for this, which is very, very basic, is that, you know, an actor's had maybe a bad audition, or they're upset about the fact that their agents just told them a no, or they haven't heard back from a role in weeks and weeks and weeks. I would love them to be like, oh, surviving rejection on the Actors Waiting podcast. the Actors Waiting Room podcast. I just absolutely butchered my own podcast name. And just listen to it and then go, oh, I feel a little bit better after this. So in the attempt of me exposing my soul on rejection, I hope that it helps someone else out there, really. The other thing about obviously receiving a lot of no's is that you eventually start to doubt your ability, your skills as an actor or a creative. You think, oh, I'm possibly not good enough. It's not happening yet. It's not working yet. There's no signs that it is working. And because, I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here. We grew up in a society, particularly, like you go to primary school, you go to secondary school, you do your A-levels, you go to university, whatever we do. We're built in quite like an academic sort of progress scheme, if I can call it that, throughout your whole lives from the age of about 4 to the age of, average person maybe graduates 21, 22. That's a lot of years, and particularly early years, where you have been put into a system where if you work hard, certain grades are achieved, certain results are achieved. And in most situations, like, if you go to the gym and you go 3 times a week for 6 months, you will see a slow improvement. The same at school, obviously. It's not the same in this industry. There's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no, equation that we all want where if I put in this many hours and this many networking events, it will equal to the big job that I want, or, I will receive more auditions, or even, just the amount of auditions you do, it still might not mean that you get these parts, or that you start to receive a lot of no's. And then as because we're being very vulnerable all the time, exposing our emotions, revealing, a very big part of ourselves by performing, you can't help but think, oh, this is my fault. This is a thing on my ability. I don't have the thing that everyone calls this, like, talent, stardust, whatever, this big fame, I'm a star type thing. Like, it doesn't happen that way. And the industry just doesn't work that way. And it is the one thing that we beat ourselves up about no end, is that we don't think we're good enough. And to that, we have to say, fuck it. We can't do that. Like, if we're going to survive rejection, the biggest thing that we have to do, which takes a lot of effort and it's not an easy thing by any means, is to just say, no, I'm really fucking good. I believe that I'm good. I want to do this. And hopefully that outweighs this feeling of that you're not good enough. Because there are 100 factors that go into casting a role. And one day I would really like to have, I have had a casting associate on, but I would like to have a casting director on to really show the full range of things that people are casted on. They're possibly casted on the way that they look, the way that they obviously dress, their weight size, hair colour, skin colour. Like, there is lots of other factors, where they're from, like, accent wise. Are they traditionally from Leeds? Are they traditionally from, I don't know, Plymouth, Devon, or wherever you want to call it? Like, there are lots of factors that go into creating a role to start with. And even then, even if you have all those things, you are competing against a lot of other people as well. And therefore, it might not happen. But it's got nothing to do with your ability of performing in that room. It's got nothing to do. You could have given the best performance of your life in there, and it still might have been the factor that got you that job. And so I hope that provides a little bit of comfort to people, that it's, if you weren't good enough, they wouldn't have invited you in the room to begin with. Like, a casting director has to go through your headshot, your CV, and fundamentally your show reel. So they've had to look at that to get you in the room. They wouldn't have wasted their time, like, saying, oh, we'll just have a load of people that we don't think are very good in the room. Does that make sense? So you doubting your ability has actually got nothing. They know you can all act. They know you can come in and you can deliver a really good performance that's engaging, that's got lots of choices, that's playful, you can't, so therefore, like, it's got to be something else, hasn't it? It can't be your ability, because the ability that what you had got you into the audition room to start with. So they know you can come in and act. I hope that provides a little bit of comfort to people. It's definitely something I tell myself a lot, because, you know, when you get rejected quite a lot of times for roles, you kind of go, well, what's the problem with me then? I've got a problem. And you haven't. You absolutely haven't. One thing that always helps me with, you know, surviving rejection is, do I want to go do something else? Like, genuinely ask yourself that question. I mean, performers ask themselves that question probably once a week. I ask myself that probably every month. Like, what am I doing? Is this for me? Should I be doing it anymore? But my answer always comes back to yes. It does. I can't leave it alone. I like, as much as people have said no or rejected me or whatever, I still can't shake it off. Like, genuinely ask yourself, like, if I quit, am I going to be happy? And, you know, if you say, yeah, I'm going to be happy if I quit, that's great. You found something else that you want to go and do, or you want to try to find something else. And that's amazing as well. There is no failure, or I hate these words where people are like, oh, they couldn't cut it in the industry. They failed. They didn't make it. They didn't have the backbone for this industry. It's a load of crap. I hate it. If you found something that you actually want to go pursue instead, you're winning. Like, go and do that thing. You found the thing that you want to go and do. But if the thing is, no, I won't be happy if I leave this industry, then use that to keep yourself motivated and be like, no, I've got to have this. I've got to do it one way or another. I've got to be in this industry. I've got to make films. I've got to be in TV shows. I've got to be on the stage. I have to do this thing. And let that draw you. And that's the one thing I do. I spin myself in circles going, is this something that I want still? Yeah. Write down the things that you love about this industry. Write down why you want to be an actor. Write down what happens if you don't become the actor. Is it that's okay, I can go and train to be something else? Great. It's, no, I have to do this. I have to succeed in some way or another. Use those things to push you on. There's a great podcast, a motivational podcast called The Mindset Mentor by Rob Dial, and I'm pretty sure I've mentioned him before. He is, he's a musician, really. He wanted to be a musician, and did a lot of jobs where he went into companies and basically became this kind of motivational speaker. But he also, I think, I haven't listened to a few episodes recently, but I'm pretty sure he still pursues his music and, wants to do that. But he provides a really good statement of questions that you can ask yourself to get yourself motivated again. And another one I think was when it's a very, I know it sounds a little bit typical, but, when you're 60 or whenever you're older, if you looked back on your life from when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, did you do it? Did it match up to, not necessarily the goal of being an actor, but did it match up to, did you try? Did you succeed in giving everything that you gave before you said, no, I'm not doing it anymore? And those questions really they really made me think no, if I look back at my 20s and go, oh, no, I didn't try hard enough, or I didn't do that thing because I wish I should have done that. I should have done that thing. I would hate that. And that's a really big motivator for myself, because I'm God, no. If I've looked back and I haven't tried, or I didn't, if you wanted to write something and I didn't end up writing it for whatever reason because of things like fear and worried about what other people thought, or all these other little things, you would kick yourself, and you are going to kick yourself later on if you don't try. And he does a lot of episodes on that, and he's obviously very motivational. So I will pop his name and link and stuff in my show notes. I mean, he's a very big podcaster, so I'm pretty sure most people will know who he is. But yeah, he provides really great questions to ask yourself that. And if that's something that sounds like would be useful to you, go and visit, go and do it. And I think this leads on to another point that's very similar is like, how often do you look back at how far you've come? How do you do that? Like, I definitely don't. I'm one of those people that's like, here's the next thing, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. As a creative, we are always looking for the next job because that's like stability. That's what we want. But sometimes like we could do with having a little look back at what we've done and how we got to where we are. Like, take 5 minutes to actually, like, you could write it down. I'm a very like pen and paper type of person, and so I like writing stuff down. It's very clear and it's set for me, and I can really see some sort of order. Sometimes people just like to think about it, but actually like sit and turn everything off, turn the phone off, turn the laptop off, turn everything off, and just actually think about how you got here, because you've already probably done quite a lot without you realizing it. And that doesn't really need to mean acting jobs. It just means, you know, like, I think back to when I was at my A levels, trying to decide whether I was going to go do dance or then go on to do something else, or history or whatever. But something pushed me towards this industry, and I eventually became an actor. If I look back and think about all the terrible drama school auditions, or all the times that I was at drama school and I did terrible performances, or I really embarrassed myself in some way, I look back and go, yeah, but I did all those things. I really put myself out there. I've been to some really great auditions. I've been into some really exciting rooms. I've worked on some really interesting things. Like, just think about your own like personal creative journey for like 1 second, because I bet you'll look back and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that other thing that I did. Or, oh my God, I managed to like overcome this big life event while still trying to balance my day job, going to auditions and doing all these things. Like, yeah, I think that's such a good one. Like, I've done that recently and I've been like, yeah, I need to be a little bit more proud of myself, of like what I've been through and like how I've got here and what I'm doing right now. Like, have a little bit of appreciation for just being you and just being in this industry anyway. And I think you will find that you've done a lot of great stuff. And like, also going back on that, like, think about the level of skill that you now have. Like, when I started drama school, I didn't know what an objective was, a unit was, an action was. I barely knew another actor's name or a director's name. Think about all of that extra knowledge that you now have as well. Like, that didn't come from nowhere. Like, you actually had to sit down and research agents, casting directors, obviously directors, like composers, or like literally like so many things. That's not like wasted knowledge. That's like in there. You've done that. You've studied hard. You might have read several acting books. You might have read autobiography books. You might have really got into your films recently and watched a lot of films. Like, just take some time to be like, you've done a lot. You know what I mean? And I think as actors, we always feel that there's always something to do. We should be doing, like, I got given this a piece of advice that you should do 5 things for your career every day. Man, I don't have time. I don't have time. I really don't have time to do all that. Not with a day job and like all the other things that I want to pursue. Like, it's too difficult. But can I do 2 things a day? Yeah. Have I done 2 things a day? Yeah. That's still something. That's still a lot. So yeah, take that and have a little look back to like what you've done. And I really do think you will be surprised by what you remember about your past and how you've got here. Right. Next one is, okay, so moving on to the next one is going to be, I think there is a big distinction between what passion, well, there is definitely. There's a big distinction between passion and obsession. And I think we get those things confused very, very easily. So let's have a look at the definition of obsession. Is an idea or thought that continually preoccupies or intrudes on a person's mind. That doesn't really sound very healthy to me. But I know a lot of creatives where that is the case, where we are obsessed with getting the role, getting seen, networking, like all these things we get very wrapped up in. Do I know every casting director's name? Do I know every director's name? Goodness me, like I think that is something that I couldn't like learn all those names. That is asking quite a lot of a person to know absolutely every person or every single person in the industry. Have you seen every single film? Have you seen every single TV show? Sorry. Like that's asking for a lot, and that kind of borderlines on obsession. But what we should have instead is just passion. Yeah, like passion is the thing that keeps us going. Obsession is like this horrible gremlin on the back of you being like, you need to do this all the time. It's prodding you. It's making you feel bad. It's making you being like, you need to be emailing casting directors. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. This is the reason why you're getting rejected. This is the what, blah, 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 blah. Like it's having all of these negative thoughts in you because it's obsessive and it's going over your head and it's controlling you really. And so we need to kind of separate those two things. It's great to have passion. It's great to have a love for what we do, but we can't be obsessed with it, because if we're going to be obsessed with it, you miss out on crucial bits of life. Like that sounds really, really wanky and like pretentious, but you really do. Like there was a lot of moments where like I didn't go home and see my family as often as I should have done, because I was so wrapped up in like, I have to keep going, I have to get to the next goal, I have to be on TV, I have to do this thing, I have to get this role. Well, like if you have no brain rest from that, like you are going to crumble, and then you don't need to be worried about surviving rejection anymore, because you will just be kind of stuck in this horrible bubble that you can't breathe in, and you will miss out on other things. And time and time again, I always hear creatives say, you have to have a life outside of acting, or you have to have a life outside of your creative venture, because if you don't, you are going to go insane, and then you aren't going to survive rejection. You definitely aren't. Like you're probably going to, I think, quit before you've even started really, and that's a shame because you want to do this thing. So having passion but not obsession, that is a really big thing, and it's really hard to break that cycle. But starting to break that cycle is by going to see friends, going to see family, do whatever makes you feel good. And that's a key point for surviving rejection anyway, is what makes you feel good. So whenever you feel down about a role, or that is the whole point of this episode. So whenever you feel down about a role, you know what's going to make you feel good. What makes me feel good is going around a bookstore and buying myself a new book, going to see some friends, going to have a glass of wine, maybe buying yourself a little like sweet treat or whatever it is. Like, is it having a bubble bath? Is it going home to your partner and talking about it with your partner? Is it, is it ringing your mum? Is it ringing your dad? Brothers, sisters, whatever. Deep down, you really do know what makes you feel better, and just give into that guilty pleasure for a little bit and go do something nice and make yourself feel better. Because again, life is too short to just sit there and think, oh, I can't treat myself, or I can't do this thing. Like, go and do those things, like not before it's too late. I don't want to sound that morbid, Jesus Christ, but like it's, you have to make sure that you have those things to make yourself feel better, because if you don't, then you don't survive the rejection. And that's the biggest tip I can give to anybody. And it's also a tip that's been given to me thousands of times. I always ask, what advice would you give to a creative? If you go back and listen to a lot of the episodes, the majority of the people say the same thing. look after your health, look after your mind, you know, have a world that's outside of acting that you can go to, that you can enjoy, because half of the thing that we get is rejected. And who wants to live in that? Because that's just fucking morbid, isn't it? Like, who wants that? Nobody wants that. So yeah, take care of yourself. Okay, so I was trying to think of a story of when I was rejected, and obviously there's plenty to choose from, but I was trying to think of something that, like, I felt insanely sad about, and I do have one story, and I will share it with you now, I suppose, and we'll go from there. But I can still remember the first time I was very heavily rejected from a big part, and it did crush me. And that's why I want to be realistic about it, not to depress anybody, we don't want to do that, but just to show that humanized side of it. The first one, I think I'd been graduated from drama school for about 4 months maybe, and I got an audition from Peter Hunt for Hollyoaks for a series regular, and I didn't get it, and I was crushed. I remember my agent ringing me being like, we've got this very big, you know, audition come in for you for Hollyoaks, and, you know, I would love for you to go get it, you know, filmed professionally. Like, you can go to these like sort of portfolio houses where you can get self-tapes done for you, so that you don't really have to think about the editing side of it. You just go, they film it, there's a reader there, and then they send it back to your agent, so you don't have to do all the techie stuff. And she said, I just really wanted you to focus. Obviously it didn't have to, but she said, I really want you to just focus on the role and all of that, rather than all of the techie stuff that comes with it, like lighting and all that stuff. And I said, okay, that's fine. And, you know, it kind of made it seem a bigger job than, like, a bigger audition than it was, I think, because I was kind of paying to go to this studio to get it filmed and stuff like that. And, you know, and I thought I did a really good job, and I'd got myself so hyped up, and I was like, this is going to happen. What do I do? Do I need to now think about moving out of London? Do I need to think about, you know, telling people and stuff? And I was so excited. And, you know, a week went past, nothing happened. Another week went past, nothing happened. And then we kind of got some response back from the studio, and they said, oh, they're really still thinking about it. They've viewed your tape multiple times. They are really thinking about it. Okay. And I didn't get it. And it crushed me. Like, it absolutely crushed me. I think I must have cried for, like, on and off, obviously not continuously, but a good week. It absolutely ruined me. I thought this was like my biggest break. I thought this was the only opportunity I was ever going to get. I thought, this is my time to do this. Like, I feel like it's my time, all this stuff. The one thing that I can say from this is that doors open all the time. There is no one small slither in your life where things are supposed to happen. I'm a big believer in things that happen for a reason, but there is not just like one moment in your life where everything happens, or this is your opportune moment and that you might mess it up. That doesn't happen. There is multiple doors opening all the time. Sometimes you fit through them and sometimes you don't. But they're still going to happen for you. They're still going to keep going for you. And this sounds really like very philosophical now. I feel like I'm quoting like The Secret or something. But I do genuinely believe that things will happen for you if they're meant for you. And although they're soul destroying when you don't get these parts, you always learn something from them, and you always will get given another shot, basically. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say, is that you'll always get given another shot. And don't put all the pressure on this one thing, because you're gonna implode. Like I did. I just put my whole life on pause for, you know, this audition, which is, I look back to it now, I just think, Grace, what the hell were you doing? Like, it's one self-tape, like, get on with it, go. Like, you did it, great, let's move on to the next thing. And this is kind of what leads into having a life outside of acting. I think if it's a role that you desperately want, you have to have something lined up that's going to distract you from it afterwards. Like once the self-tape's finished, are you going to go to the cinema? Are you going to go do something nice? Are you going to go cook a nice meal? Are you going to, I don't know, people like colouring and sketching, and nowadays I don't, but I feel like that's a thing on TikTok. I feel like loads of people are colouring at the moment. Anyway, there's that. Or is it, you know, for me, it's picking up a book and going into a different world and distracting myself for an hour or so. And you do generally feel better after that. So yeah, try not to get all the hopes on this one thing and the pressure. And again, the obsession thing comes in and you're like, oh, I need this. No, you don't. You don't need it. It's not your entire worth. It's just not. It's just something that you get to do or that you would like to do. That is easier said than done. But hopefully you can see where I'm coming from with that. So my last point, I think, and I saw this recently, and I think the speech is fantastic. I watched a commencement speech by Jim Carrey the other day, and this might be really old news to some people, but I hadn't seen the speech before. I popped up on my TikTok, and I think the speech is called "Choose Love, Not Fear." Again, I'm going to link it in the show notes so that people can watch it. And I've watched it a second time, and I probably will watch it more and more times because it is just so good. Like, it's so good. He talks about a whole multitude of different things, and obviously creative ideas and pursuing the arts. But the one thing that kind of stuck with me is that he had a dad who wanted to be, you know, an actor, comedian. And he never got to do that. He went on to be an accountant. But obviously Jim Carrey went on to be, you know, a comedic actor, really. And his dad always used to say that, you know, he had his second dream through him. But as he said, he pursued accountancy. And one day he still was made redundant. And Jim Carrey says this, I mean, he will say it much more eloquently than I'm trying to say it now, but he says it that, you know, you can easily fail at the things that you don't want to do as well as the things that you do want to do. So you might as well do the thing that you want to do rather than the thing that you don't. And I just thought, what a fucking good piece of advice. Like, we're always told that, I mean, I think we are very brave as creatives for taking a leap and, you know, surviving rejection and being in this industry. But you could also fail at being a lawyer, being a doctor, being an accountant, and, you know, I don't want to say like his dad failed, he was just made redundant, but you can 100% not succeed in certain avenues that you also don't care about. So you might as well take a leap of faith and go do the thing that you really want to do, like acting, writing, voiceover, directing, casting directing. You might as well go do that, because you can succeed and you can fail in both areas, and people really forget that. Yes, I think there's probably a little bit of a higher rejection rate as an actor than there is probably for an accountant, but why not go and do that? And like, the only reason why we do these things is because of fear, and so we should choose the thing that we love rather than not pursuing something out of fear of might not getting it. Because I can 100% guarantee that you will fear getting older and not going for the thing that you actually wanted when you were 18, 16, age of 4. And I thought that was a really nice way to sort of conclude the episode, and go and watch it if you haven't already. I feel like maybe it's one of those things that people are like, oh, I saw that ages ago, Grace, how have you not seen that? But maybe I'm late to the party. But even if you have seen it, go and watch it again. And like, that is something that I'm now adding into my rejection toolbox. 100% doing that. I'm adding that in. I've got like a list of like movies that make me motivational after I've been sort of like rejected, or you know, or sometimes I'll take myself off to see a play or whatever. Like, I have like a list of things that I will watch that will help ignite that fire again. And that's definitely being added to it. I think it's great. So thank you so much for listening and me waffle about rejection, and I hope that it hasn't been too morbid, but we will soon see in the editing room, because if it is, it's not making the light of day, because who needs that? Nobody needs that. Yeah, and I made my way through quite a lot of tea there as well. Like, I'm over halfway. I'm chuffed with that. That's fine. Sorry for the people who are just listening on their headphones and you hear me slurp every now and again. But yeah, I hope this does provide maybe a little bit of comfort. I hope that's the kind of the main reason for it. And yeah, let's keep surviving rejection together. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks so much, guys. See you soon.